I'd like to call to order the City of Oak Harbor Planning Commission regular meeting, July 28, 2020. Due to COVID-19, there will be no physical meeting location per Washington Proclamation 20-28. The meeting may be viewed on the City of Oak Harbor YouTube page. To listen to the live meeting, please call 623-404-9000, meeting ID 1488-774388. Once again, the phone number is 623-404-9000, and the meeting ID number is 1488-774388. To leave a public comment that will be made part of the record, please call 360-279-4511 and leave a voice message. Once again, that phone number is 360-279-4511. And if anyone with staff or the commissioners has trouble hearing me, or if I'm speaking muffled, let me know and I can remove my mask. The first item on the agenda this evening is the roll call. I'll let the record show that the only commissioner missing this evening is Commissioner Phillip. Second item on the agenda is the approval of the June 23rd, 2020 minutes. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the June 23rd, 2020 regular business meeting.
And do I have a second? They're all muted again, all of them. Okay, Tony seconded, okay. All in favor, raise your right hand. I abstained because I wasn't here. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. The next item on the agenda this evening is our public meeting and hearings. And the first item is a public hearing. And once again, folks that need to make public comment need to dial 360-279-4511 and leave a voice message. So, zoning code revisions, building height definition, and accessory building standards. And once again, this is a public hearing. Staff will present draft versions of ordinance sections dealing with these two topics for review and possible recommendation to the City Council for adoption. Ray, are you going to take over at this time? He's got to be unmuted. Why is everybody muted? Okay, Ray? Can you unmute
Yes.
yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, members of the commission and the chairman. I'm going to try and speak through this. I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my end, so I'm going to turn my volume down. If you have any questions, you might have to raise your hand or something, but I'm still getting the feedback. Anyway, I'm going to make a brief presentation here. We've talked about this one before in fairly great detail, so I'm just going to put up some information on the screen here and let you all take a look at it as I go through that. I'm hoping that shows up for everybody now. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about the two sections of the code that we are looking at making some minor adjustments to. The first one being the accessory building height section, or excuse me, accessory buildings and the standards by which those are judged. This appears in 4 different sections of the code in R1, R2, R3, and R4 zone district. It is number 10 in our density section for each of those. And what we have there are a number of kind of awkward and potentially conflicting statements in there dealing with the single story versus overall height, the floor area, which is not defined in the code, but building area is, the terminology of within 5 feet and whether or not that actually means what we think it means. That's kind of open to interpretation. And then maximum floor area also is not defined in the code. So what we have on the screen is the existing code, and following that up with what the proposed code states. What we did is we changed it so that it had an accessory building or buildings, so you could have more than one shed in your backyard if you needed that, as long as the total is less than 600 square feet, which is the same as previously. And we changed the height to a specific height number of 15 feet rather than saying 1 story. We also allowed for additional height if you provide additional setbacks. And that kind of ends if you put the accessory building in the envelope of your typical setbacks, which include the side yard and rear yard setback that would be for a standard home. You can go up to additional height for that as well, as it has the same impact as a single family residence would. And then talking a little bit about the exterior design with regard to how it matches or complements the existing on the structure on the property. And then the same thing as we had before as far as the maximum building area, not exceeding 50% of the primary structure. Yes, I'm getting a lot of feedback. Sorry. I turned it off. Sorry, everybody. I'm trying to get it so I'm not getting any feedback here. I don't know. Does that work? No, I'm still getting it. Can you hear me up to These are all. Can you hear me better now? Still getting feedback. Everything is turned on. Connected. Okay. I apologize. What? Okay, I apologize for that. I'm hoping you're getting all this presentation via the visuals. In any case, you have the red line version and the strikeout version in your packet there. So I encourage you to refer to that. If you do have any questions, I'll be available for questions when I'm done with the presentation. And then moving on to the second one, we have a building height definition. This is the current building height definition. You can see that it is based on the corners of the lot or the parcel. And we changed that to be based on the corners of the building, which makes a lot more sense. We discussed this previously, that the issue that we had is that sometimes developers were having issues on properties that had a significant slope, and were having to create new lots or do boundary line adjustments to make it work. It felt like kind of torturing the code to make things work. And so most codes, most ordinances have the building height definition tied to the building and not the property. It seems to make a lot more sense. So I'm going to stop there and open up to any questions. I hope that that came through for you well enough that you could understand. It's never been approved. Can anybody hear anything I'm saying?
We can. Really well. It's either from other people or it's completely wrong.
Hey, Ray. So what we're talking about here are accessory buildings such as large sheds, that sort of thing, but it doesn't have anything to do with additional dwelling units, right?
It does.
Sorry. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, that is, well, here's the thing. So it is for all accessory structures, and accessory structures can include accessory dwelling units. So there is a possibility that, you know, an accessory dwelling unit would fall into this. And the fact that we had the limitations on height and 1 story and things like that did fall over into the ADU world, essentially. So under our previous code, you couldn't do, or under the existing regulations, you couldn't do like an accessory dwelling unit apartment on top of a garage because it said 1 story. And so now you can, provided you provide that setback or the, you know, the distance regulation, because say for instance, you want to put an apartment in the backyard on top of a garage, and it's going to be 20 feet tall. Well, if you want to do that, you have to provide at least 5 feet of extra setback to allow for that because of the regulation, you know, providing that additional 1 foot to go along with that. So if you have a 20-foot tall building, an accessory building, you would need to be at least 10 feet away from the rear property line or from the property lines. And so that allows for the ADU to be a little bit taller and gives a little bit more flexibility for an ADU because of that going from a single story to an actual number.
Okay, so it smooths it out for ADUs and for, you know, any other garage, whatever, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. Is anybody putting in any plans to build an accessory dwelling unit?
I'm not aware of it. To be perfectly honest, the reason that this even came up is because when I first started here almost 6 years ago now, the code said an accessory structure could be built within 5 feet of the property line. And I read that and I thought, what does that mean? That means nothing. It could mean 0, it could mean 1, it could mean 5. So that section of the code always bothered me from the standpoint of it doesn't really make sense. So, you know, it's been several years. We haven't had any problems with it per se, but during our sequestration here, it's been a good time to kind of take a look into some of these minor little quibbles and try and get them fixed. And that's what we're doing right now.
Ray,
Yes, sir.
this is Bruce. In response to Tony's question, if somebody wanted to, if they had the room on the side of their house, they would be allowed to build an accessory structure, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and this is in response to affordable housing issues, correct?
In a way, yes.
Okay. So if I've got 17 feet on the side of my house to the fence line, and I want to put a 40-foot tiny home back there and run utilities, I can do that.
The way that it works is an accessory building needs to be in the rear yard, which is defined in our code.
Okay, the rear yard being behind the garage or the face of the garage.
No, behind the home. The rear yard is what's behind the home. What's to the side of the house, behind the front of the house, it can be part of the side yard. That's not necessarily the rear yard.
Okay, all right, just clarifying that. Thank you.
No problem.
I'll make one other comment. Okay. I don't know if it was a typo or what, but under purpose, Is that meant to say these sections of code were introduced at the Planning Commission of July 28th? I'm looking at the staff.
Yeah, that was probably copied over from another staff report. I apologize for that.
Okay. That's my only comment.
Okay. I've moved closer. I moved the computer closer, hoping it's going to sound better.
Anyone else like to make a comment, questions? There is at this time no public comment. I'm going to open the public hearing at this time. The public hearing is opened. Now, do the commissioners, any of you have anything to add to the public record for comment on these issues? If not, I would certainly entertain a motion at this time. Do I have a motion? No motion.
Let me try that, Greg.
Yes, go ahead, Bruce.
I'll make a motion to approve the city council accept building standards section 19.20, 120, and 10, 19.20, 145.10, section 19.20, 8010, 19.20.21510 for the R1, R2, R3, R4 zone district respectively.
I second the motion.
I have a motion, it's been seconded. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Having no public, well, at this time, I'll just close this public hearing then. Okay, the next item on the agenda this evening is it's a public meeting, Central Business District Zoning Code Review. Staff will present information regarding possible changes to the Central Business District zoning ordinance based on public input and discussion with the Planning Commission and City Council. Once again, I believe that Ray is taking this, Ray Lindenberg.
That is correct. To be perfectly honest, this is going to be a difficult presentation to make with this sound the way it is. And I apologize. I've tried everything I can do here to make this work. So let me know with a show of hands if you can hear what I'm saying, can you please raise your hand and let me know that it's coming through?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, thank you. It seems to kind of come and go. I get a little bit of feedback every once in a while, but I'm going to try and get through this. So what I'm going to do right now is share my screen again and go through this presentation. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So this is kind of the nuts and bolts. We talked about some of the concepts and the ideas behind making a change to our Central Business District Code and the reasoning behind that in the past. And so I'm not going to focus on that too much tonight. I'm going to keep the presentation fairly brief, but I am going to go into a little bit of detail as to what it is we're looking at making changes to the code itself. And I did talk to the City Council previously regarding this with the same presentation. It was kind of unusual to go to them first, but that's kind of how the calendar laid out. So what I will do is kind of light into that. There's the code for you if you want to go ahead and read it real quick. This is the existing central business district text, and this is everything that's within that code, and I will go into detail here. So we're talking about doing some draft changes here. These are some of the ideas and the concepts that we've come up with to make changes, to make it better, to get to a point where we have a code that works for everybody and we don't have any confusion or interpretations that can cause issues, things like that. We're trying to get to a point where the code works for everybody. So I'm going to zoom in here, and we're going to take a closer look at the draft changes here. So what you can see, I included for you, I believe, in the packet. Actually, no, I didn't. Okay, so what we have is the proposed changes here. The red are the strikeout changes, and the yellow is what we're going to, or we're looking at possibly adding into the code. And so one of the things that came up immediately with our review of this were the words that Judge Hancock provided to us in the Lehigh decision with regard to that approval and subsequent appeal. One of the things that he mentioned was that the purpose and intent statement seemed to require certain things that perhaps might not be, from our standpoint, something that we want to require from the actual purpose and intent statement. So one of the sentences that is in that statement says mixed-use developments combining retail and visitor-oriented activities on the ground floor and residential uses above are required. And so what that does is it makes it so that you couldn't build a hotel. You couldn't build an office building. You couldn't build just a residential building because it says office, retail, and residential uses above. So what we did is we changed that slightly to say office, retail, or residential uses above and remove the required and leave in encouraged. Because we want to allow that flexibility and we don't want to require that, somebody who wants to develop a hotel downtown to provide office, retail, and residential, all of these kind of prescriptive uses in their hotel, that might not work for them. And we want to allow that flexibility and encourage the development of a use like that if that's going to come in. And so what we did instead is we included a new sentence that includes the terminology active facades at the street level on Pioneer Way are required and pedestrian-oriented development is encouraged throughout the district. And I'll go into active facades in just a minute, but I did want to kind of highlight that pedestrian-oriented development is encouraged throughout the district. And what that means is the CBD is not just Pioneer Way. The CBD includes Fidalgo and Dock Street and some of these kind of side streets to Pioneer Way. And so we want to make sure that we are encouraging that pedestrian development throughout the district. One of the other things on there, it says large surface parking lots are not encouraged, which is kind of an awkward sentence. We just changed that to discouraged. And what happens there is I can't zoom in on that. So this is just what I was talking about when I was speaking to you, but I'll zoom back in. We do talk about the combination of retail and visitor-oriented activities, and that will come up later also as I talk about this. And the important thing, again, being that active facade concept. So we propose to put in a new definition of what an active facade is. And this is the definition that I wrote up, and it's not something that's been vetted by our attorneys or anything like that, but it is a concept. An active facade is a building that features transparent windows, doors, or similar structures that allows a view into a retail store or service, restaurant or pub, or the publicly accessed lobby areas. So what this does is this provides a kind of physical means by which what we're looking for on Pioneer Way, and that is active windows, people walking by and being able to see either goods or services or restaurants or interesting things that engage the eye, engage the interest of people walking downtown. We don't want to see an office building with the windows all shuttered and somebody sitting at a desk behind, closed mini blinds or something like that. That doesn't encourage, people to walk around downtown. It doesn't encourage the kind of vibrant activity that you want to see in a downtown area. So that's what that is there for. Is it shows up in the purpose and intent statement, because that's what we're looking for, is activity, and that active facade will hopefully drive us in that direction. The second thing I wanted to talk about was the permitted use list, and as you can see, it's quite long, and there is a lot of red in there. What we have right now are 63 different uses that are on our permitted use list. Those uses include over 30 different retail shops. Now, in that use list, we have a little R designation after the retail uses, and those are specifically in there for a reason. I'll get into that in just a minute also. But we also have a lot of kind of duplication and very similar type uses. We have a sporting goods shop, a shoe store, and a bicycle shop. These are all very similar type uses that might be selling the exact same things. We have bars, cocktail lounges, and taverns, but we don't have any of those things defined in our definitions section. We have printing shop, photocopying and blueprinting. We have uses that are no longer viable in today's economy. And we have other uses that are permitted in the C1 and CBD zone districts. And so when we look at our 63 uses that fall into the CBD district, we have to refer those back to other zone districts too, because a lot of what our zone districts say in the C3 and the C5 is uses that are permitted in the C1 and CBD. So these 63 uses are also allowed in the C3 and the C5 zone district. And when you add those up with what's allowed in the C3 and the C5 zone district, you get a very long list in those two districts as well. And so it becomes quite difficult to administer and go through and explain to people. So let me zoom in here and we'll talk about a little bit what we had. Again, you notice the R's after some of these that show up as retail. What I'm proposing to change there is to remove the R. So we take the R out and we replace it instead with an asterisk. And that asterisk may be considered as an active facade. So we go back to active facade definition. And these items will be, or these uses will be ones that we can consider an active facade. And they will include all your retail uses that are already there. And they'll also include some new ones, including like the public lobby of a convention center or a brew pub or things like that. And these are all, going back into that concept of increasing traffic, increasing the visual interest along Pioneer Way. And also it works from a public safety standpoint. If you can see into a building and you can see out of a building, that is a safety issue as well. And so we kind of go through the permitted use list here. You see a lot of red being stricken from the record there, and then some new ones, including minor retail sales and minor retail services. And the reason I have that highlighted is because we've added in another couple new definitions. Minor retail sales is a commercial enterprise where goods are provided directly to a customer, either available for immediate purchase and removal or as an arrangement for a package delivery. And these minor retail sales encompass areas of less than 11,999 square feet, because that's what the definition or the criteria was for a neighborhood grocery store, which was included as one of those retail uses in those original 63 different uses there. And so we figured that was a good cutoff. It was not a number that was going to create a situation where we have non-conforming businesses in the downtown area either. The second and flip side of that definition is the major retail sales, and that's just essentially the same thing except larger than 12,000 square feet. Those are going to be your Home Depots and your Office Maxes and things like that. And those will be allowed in other zone districts besides the CBD, because that's not necessarily something we want to see on Pioneer Way, is a large retail enterprise kind of taking over the area. That's typical of a lot of historic and smaller downtown areas, is to kind of limit the size of retailers to protect the existing local businesses and smaller businesses that are already there. Also, we have a minor retail service. This includes your offices and personal and professional services, accountants, attorneys, beauty salons, etc. A lot of what's happening here is we're taking these 63 different uses and we're boiling them down into a more manageable and easy to administer list. And this will allow for the exact same uses that we have down there now, but in a more concise and reasonable way of explaining it. Okay, so you see this graphic that I did previously when we talked about our public participation aspect of the code amendment or this project, and these are some of the ideas that people had and some of the things that people wanted to see in the downtown area. And all of these things were came out of that survey. They were all specific, uses that people wanted to see. This was the magic wand thing. If you could do one thing downtown, what would you like to see? Lots of people mentioned hotel or brew pub, arcades, museums, unique stores, things like that. And the interesting thing that all of these things that you see on this list here or in this graphic are existing somehow in our permitted use list as it is now, and will exist as we have it proposed to be kind of boiled down. The only thing that we are missing there that is not allowed is library. And that is something that if people are interested in having in the downtown area in the future, possibly, we can certainly include that as a new use to be included on the list. And that will be just something that we'll have further discussion about. And then the final thing that we wanted to talk about were the dimensional standards. And you can see it's a tiny little portion of the code, but I think it's probably one of the most important. We used to have a minimum lot width of no limitation, a minimum lot depth also saying no limitation. That is unusual in our code. In fact, it's unique. Every other zone district has a minimum lot width and depth. They also have a minimum lot area, but I felt like when we looked at the way that the code works and the way that recent events have kind of transpired, that providing a minimum lot width and a minimum lot depth kind of ensure that we don't have unintended consequences with regard to the creation of new lots or boundary line adjustments that might create protection strips or kind of oddball shaped lots that may not be developable, things like that. So what we propose is a 25-foot lot width, which doesn't affect any existing parcels on Pioneer Way, neither does the 50-foot depth. The only parcel that is less than 25 feet is the parcel that Serendipity Lane lies on, and that isn't really going to change because it is hemmed between two buildings there. And this refers to the creation of new lots or any sort of reconfiguration of an existing lot. If somebody does a boundary line adjustment, they will be bound by these two numbers. And if a new lot is created, they would also be facing those two numbers as well. Oh, sorry, I'm having problems here. Okay, so as I mentioned, the CBD district is the only one that doesn't include dimensional standards. We'd like to bring this in line with the rest of the code because, like I said, we feel like that this is kind of creating issues for us with regard to unintended consequences with new developments in the CBD. So I'm going back to the existing code text there, the existing zone district text. This is the way it looks now. If we were to go through and make the changes that I've been discussing and showed you, this is what it would look like. You can see that's a lot shorter, and not saying that shorter is always better, but when we're dealing with having a lot of information being provided to the public and to developers, and also from our own standpoint, it makes it a lot easier to administer when we have something that's a little bit more rational and a little bit easier to understand for everybody. And the secondary issue is that as we've looked at the CBD code, we've realized that all of our commercial codes need some help. And so in order to go through this full process, we're kind of expanded out the entirety of all of the commercial zone districts. And so in order to really do a good job with it, rather than just a Band-Aid approach, we're going to go back into the other commercial zone districts, and we're going to do a similar type review of those. And a lot of what will happen here is when we're looking at some of these uses, you'll see that a certain zone district will allow a bookstore and another zone district will allow a bookshop. And this is what happens over many years of minor revisions to codes is you have redundancies and things that don't make sense. So what we're going to do is look at doing a matrix of all the different uses that are allowed in all the different commercial zone districts and see how they all fit together and make sure that they make sense. And so that's kind of the next step after we get through with the CBD code amendments that will make changes to improve the CBD zone. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. Just wanted to get you all updated on that. I'm certainly open for questions, concerns, comments. We did have some interesting and very useful discussion at the City Council previously, talked about the idea of having like small craft and kind of maker spaces, if you will, to allow for people who maybe do woodworking or things like that and want to sell on site. That's kind of an interesting concept from the standpoint of, in a smaller town that might be an interesting way to bring people into the downtown areas to have those kind of small, tiny industry, if you will, or something along those lines. So like I said, I'm open to any discussion, and I will wrap it up there and open up to all.
So, Amy, you have your hand up, Amy? She needs to be unmuted.
She's muted.
She's muted. Okay, Amy.
Check. Okay, great. Thanks. Ray, I think sometime at the beginning of the first time I heard about this, there was some mention about our names for the Central Business District and that it's sometimes a little bit confusing to the public, CBD1 versus CBD versus, has there been any clarification of that, or are we past that conversation? It is what it is.
No, we're not past anything right now, to be perfectly honest. I think that is a very valid point. It's difficult for me to explain to somebody on the phone CBD1, CBD, CBD2, et cetera. So that's definitely something that's still kind of a potential change. I just haven't really explored it from the standpoint of, what are we going to call these right now? But I am open to suggestions for sure. It might be just a matter of coming up with another acronym or a different, kind of word or, letters and numbers, things like that. Because unfortunately, that's kind of the way that planners work in that way. But it's something that we're definitely still looking at.
Okay. I wish I had some great suggestion. I don't, but I do know that when I talk to people, when they think of the Central Business District, usually they're saying Pioneer, and sometimes they're including maybe Dock and Fidalgo, but there's no comprehension that there might be different rules based on which location you're at.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that was brought up in the Hancock decision was the concept that the CBD 1 and 2 zones appear to be, encouraging residential, whereas the CBD should be encouraging just business because it says business in it. So, there's that kind of, trade-off and play between the two. So, yeah, it's definitely something we're looking at.
Anyone else have comment? Question?
Yeah, thank you, Ray. There's probably a good way to know the difference, but if you allow dwelling, as a code, how do you encourage hotels, that type of dwelling, versus putting up a bunch of condos in that business zone?
One of the uses in the existing code and in the proposed new code is a hotel, and that is distinct from residential from a planner's standpoint. That there is definitely a difference between the two. That being said, the mixed use nature of it could allow for a combination of the two. So, I mean, it hasn't happened yet. Nobody's built a hotel, but it's not because of anything that's in our code. And I think that's something that people need to understand also is that there is a lot of flexibility in this code now, and there will be just as much, if not more, when we go through this process. It just hasn't happened for whatever market reasons. Sometimes that's just the way it is. But we're working towards making it easy as possible to administer for us, but at the same time making it best for the community so that we get something that everybody is going to be, at least happy with. Maybe everybody won't be thrilled with every decision that we have in there, but we're trying to balance it for business property owners, existing residents, visitors, et cetera. So it's a definite challenge.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm all about consolidation. I think that's a great idea. Being ambiguous, someone is going to have to approve each business. And can you remind us who makes that decision and kind of how that process works to be approved to have a certain type of business in any of the business districts?
Well, if you're talking specifically about a retail use, if somebody comes in with a business license and they're moving into an existing building and they sell something, as long as that business is not somehow restricted in another way, whether it's sales of alcohol or marijuana or whatever, we will generally approve that in most of our commercial zones. If it's a retail use, it's going to be approved because we have retail uses, allowed in all those commercial zones, and we can look at it from the standpoint of this is similar to, because they're selling a product, whatever that product is. Generally, it's going to be very similar, unless it's a motor vehicle, RVs, boats, large equipment, stuff like that. We do have separate use categories for those, and those would not be allowed in the CBD. And so if somebody were to come in with that sort of decision to be made, technically the code says that the development services director makes that decision. And, if somebody came in tomorrow and said, hey, I want to open up a men's clothing store on Pioneer Way, I would feel fairly comfortable as a representative of the department or a representative of the director to say, yes, we would allow for that. So ultimately, the code says it's up to the director.
Up to the director. Okay. I guess I'm just playing devil's advocate, but if it's not spelled out, boom, there it is. Someone gets denied for a certain type of business. I don't know if that's potential liability somehow, but that's okay. I'm fine with that. You mentioned in the minor retail category, no drive-throughs. Is that correct?
That is
What about the coffee shop?
Well, actually, I take that back. It's not in minor retail, I don't believe. Let me double check that just a second.
If I can chime in, I believe it's a conditional use in the central business district, so it's not in the permitted use section, but drive-throughs are primarily conditional uses, even in our C3 commercial retail sections, just because of the number of trips that they generate and the traffic interruptions. So they are conditional use in most districts. So in the downtown, they are also a conditional use. And the Whidbey
Okay.
coffee,
Yeah, people around here love their drive-through coffee, so we don't want to mess with that.
No, the Whidbey coffee did get the conditional use permit. That's how they're operating right now.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, Ray. I appreciate it.
I don't see any other hands, Ray.
All right. I think it worked, but I think the sound came through better that time. I'm glad.
Just as a follow-up and a connection, most of these code amendments that we're considering at the Development Services Department, I mean, of course, we want to do anything that refines our code, makes it better, easier to understand, and so on. We want to take the opportunity to do that. However, most of these code amendments are connected to the moratorium that was placed in downtown. And we're getting to that 1-year mark in August. We're going to ask for a moratorium extension so that we can go through our text amendments, SEPA review process, and so on before we bring it to City Council. We don't need an extra 6 months to to take care of it, but we do need that extra time. So at the August meeting, we're going to City Council to extend the moratorium, but these code amendments will help us not having to extend it even further.
Thank you, CAC. I guess that wraps that up, right, Ray? We're wrapped up there.
I believe so. I will be back again to discuss that at a later date.
I'm not quite used to this. It seems a little disjointed to me somehow. The next item on our agenda this evening is the 2020 comp plan amendments, and this is a public meeting. Staff will provide an update on the process and schedule the amendments scheduled for this year.
And,
CAC?
thank you. I'm just going to provide a brief update. I don't have a presentation or large handouts. I do want to give you updates on all the items that are moving forward. So for the housing element, as you are aware, we got grant money from the Department of Commerce to hire a consultant to do a housing action plan. We have hired a consultant, and we have the first stakeholder meeting actually on Thursday. That's coming up this week. So that's very exciting to start that process. And so at the next Planning Commission, we'll have a lot to report from that stakeholder meeting and the information that we gathered from there. So look forward to more information on that. The capital improvement planning process will start in August. We are still going through some council decisions with rates and utilities. We'll hopefully have something squared away, and we'll start looking at the upcoming budget and the upcoming 6 years worth of projects. So more things to come in August and September on that. The land use change, Harbor Heights property, this is the large property that the city purchased to develop as a park. The city has hired a consultant, David Evans Consulting Firm. We met with that consulting firm last Friday. Staff met with them, different departments met with them, and we also met with some of the leagues, the sports leagues, to determine some of their needs. So we had an all-day kind of kickoff meeting for that, and so the planning process has begun for that. We will probably do the land use change, working with that project as we move forward. So we will be sending out notices here in the next month, and the Planning Commission can expect to see some of this come to the September and October meeting. So that is also moving forward. The joint planning area, this is, I brought it up last time. The Island County is going through their work program in light of all the COVID-19 impacts. And they have, I think in our conversations with them, they indicated that that's actually kind of going to slide to maybe next year's work program, or maybe even a little later. We and the city administration are working to keep that topic still alive and in front of the county commissioners. So that process is happening in the background. And if anything happens, any movement happens there, we'll keep the commission updated. But we are definitely interested in seeing that project go forward. There are many opportunities to talk about it. We just have to engage the county. They have a lot of stuff going on too based on this COVID-19. We just have to keep them engaged on it, and we'll do that as we go forward this year. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions, commissioners? Well, I think that wraps up our agenda for this evening. A reminder that our next scheduled meeting is Tuesday, August 25th, 2020. And I want to thank everyone for their attendance. Christy, I'd like to say hi to you specifically. Not met you yet in person. Nice to have you aboard. There being no further business, I adjourn the meeting. The meeting's adjourned.